Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Park Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
This week on To the Contrary, big, angry marches, slews of court litigation, misinformation, and more. A week after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the nation seems to have exploded in protest. Will it last until the midterms? Then, women take the lead in the insurrection investigation. Our former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson and Representative Liz Cheney, heroines today in the mold of Margaret Chase Smith, former House member and senator who took on McCarthyism? Hello, I'm Bonnie Orbey. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, after the Roe decision. Thousands of pro-choice men and women have taken to the streets in rallies and protests to secure abortion rights state by state and to provide funding for women who can't afford to travel for an abortion. Meanwhile, crisis pregnancy centers are gearing up to counsel an onslaught of women. These mainly Christian CPCs don't provide abortions and don't have medical licenses. Their work is to discourage women from getting abortions. In Texas, 2 NBC producers visited a state and federally funded CPC and report being told abortions can cause mental illness and implied they could also cause cancer or infertility. That is medically inaccurate information. These clinics receive hundreds of millions of dollars from the states and the federal government across the country, including $110 million from the state of Texas alone. A CBS News poll finds 67% of women oppose overturning Roe. In the majority opinion, Justice Alito stressed the ruling could close divisions caused by abortion rights, but it appears to have created a fireball of division continuing full force, which is separating the nation more, not bringing it together. Joining me today are former Representative Donna Edwards, Republican strategist Ann Stone, Repro Action co-founder Erin Matson, and Washington Examiner columnist Tiana Lowe. And for the first segment, Genevieve Wood of the Heritage Foundation. Are the CPCs misleading people?
I don't believe they are. A recent study showed that 2,700 pregnancy resource centers around this country helped over 2 million individuals, the majority of them being women. And they help them in numerous ways, Bonnie. Yes, they offer counseling. They talk to women about their options, but they also help them with material goods, meaning they give them parental training. They give them a lot of diapers. They're not just there before the pregnancy. They're there after the pregnancy. And they try to help women where they are.
Wait a minute. You say they're there. Former Congressman Barney Frank, Democrat of Massachusetts, used to say the conservative interest in life begins at conception and ends at birth. Do they pay for nannies? Do they pay for women support for women while they're trying to go to work to pay for these children? Do they pay for private school tuition or college tuition?
They don't pay for all those things. And these different individual centers are
things, right?
They offer. I just said they offer counseling. They do, in some cases, offer child care so that mothers can go to work. It depends on the center. But the reality is, Bonnie, we as a society ought to try and help do that. We shouldn't force women to have an abortion because they think they can't afford to have that child. That is absolutely wrong. We shouldn't be putting women in that place. And as a matter of fact, there was a New York Times article on this, I think from a couple of years ago, that talked about one of the problems for young women in this generation is they have all these choices, but one of the very choices they want the most is to have a child, but they often feel like they can't afford it. That is not what our society should be. We should be making it possible for women to have children they want.
Donna, your thoughts. You were in Congress. Why is federal money flowing to these so-called CPCs? And by the way, there are many more CPCs out there at this time than there are abortion clinics.
Well, and of course, we know that they are growing, especially and they will, especially in this post-Roe environment. Look, I think these CPCs are problematic for a couple of reasons, one of which is the kind of information that is provided, as has been demonstrated by these visits to CPCs, can be very misleading. A lot of mythology about the effects of abortion, about causing mental illness, about causing breast cancer, about causing a whole set of things that really don't exist and are not medically based. And so I think it's problematic to have federal funding and and state funding of these entities when they're providing very misleading information to women. And the fact is that Republicans in Congress, and this is the truth, they want to cut SNAP programs, they want to cut education, they want to cut childcare, all of these things that it takes actually to raise a child, that as a policy matter, there are many members of Congress on the Republican side who will not support the kinds of things that are necessary after the birth of a child. And so if a woman has a choice, let her go where she needs to get an abortion, should she want one.
Tiana, lots of these women, if you watch the reports coming in from women's health clinics around the country, they're already mothers. They have, some of them, 3 and 4 children, and they're already starving or not able to support these kids. Should they be forced, and will they be forced by overturning Roe to have children they can't afford, don't want, and will not end up in a good situation?
Well, obviously, the answer to this is now it depends, because what the Supreme Court did is they've effectively democratized this issue to become a states' rights issue. In places like Mississippi, where you only had one functional abortion clinic, you shut it down, and mind you, a lot of these purple states are not going to take an all or nothing approach. A lot of these purple states, like Florida, are going to be like Germany or France, where, the 15-week abortion cap that Ron DeSantis signed, that everyone acts as very radical. The Dobbs case was about a 15-week ban. That is still longer than they allow in France. And Emmanuel Macron, the progressive president of France, campaigned on not allowing them to lift the 12-week abortion cap to 14 weeks. So America is already at we are absolutely a global anomaly in how long we allow abortions to occur. It's really North Korea and China that allows people to have abortions as long as us.
Erin, we are a global anomaly. Central and South America are opening up choice for women, and we're going backwards.
Correct, Bonnie. And in fact, after this horrible decision from the Supreme Court, which effectively said that due process under the law does not exist for women in this country, what you had was actually European leaders stepping forward and expressing concern. So we are an anomaly globally. I'd like to go back, if I could, to these anti-abortion fake clinics, because it's really serious. This is the conversion therapy wing of the anti-abortion movement, and it is part of the core operating infrastructure of the right wing in this country. And what they are seeking is state funds in order to build support for the right wing in the United States. There's things that they do. One, it's conversion. And so you've already talked about it, and Donna was outlining some of the slippery tactics that are used, including outright lies that go to people. But 2, it's also indoctrination. When what Genevieve was calling counseling was in fact people who are oftentimes not licensed telling people they're going to go to hell because they had sex. And 3rd, it's surveillance. And this is really, really scary. We are now in an environment where people have real concerns about being criminalized for their reproductive behavior, including abortion, but also miscarriage. And what you have is people who are not bound by HIPAA, who may be sharing information with prosecutors who will lock people up.
And HIPAA, by the way, is the federal law concerning health rights that people have. Anyway, Anne, you are sort of in the middle here. You're a pro-choice Republican, but you are a big supporter of Justice Kavanaugh when he was Judge Kavanaugh being promoted to the Supreme Court, and you said you did not think he would vote to overturn Roe.
Well,
were you surprised?
Neither did Susan Collins. Whether or not he misled her in direct conversations they had, I have to take her at her word. She said he did. And I think one of the reasons the decision was delayed is I think Kavanaugh really was reticent to vote on the part of the decision that actually overturned Roe.
If he really felt that way, we know that Chief Justice John Roberts wrote a concurrence in which he said he would not have voted to overturn Roe. He would have voted to uphold the Mississippi law with a 15-week ban on abortion.
And Roberts did vote against overturning Roe.
Right, but Kavanaugh did not.
I know, but I think he would have been there. I think that's one of the delays. But be that as it may, let's go back to what we've been talking about here with the pregnancy centers. If they're truly putting out the kind of disinformation that we read about, the white hot spotlight has to be on them, and they have to be forced to clean up their act.
Or what about ending government monies to these? I mean, it's just,
Well, especially if they're providing disinformation, they shouldn't be getting any government information. But shine the spotlight there, clean it up. Let's go forward. Let's look forward, not talk about what they've done in the past, but let's try to get everybody to clean up their act going forward. One of the real problems, and one of the things people are waking up to, is we no longer have a national fight on abortion, so to speak. We have 50 fights on abortion. 50 fights that are going to mean more money being spent on the fight and not on women and their families. 50 fights, where women in some states are going to have to worry, do I have any rights? I also, looking forward, want to look for commensurate things that men should have to be held to so that there's equal, equality on reproductive rights before the law. Maybe there should be mandatory vasectomies at 13 that are reversible, and men have to, get government permission to reverse them when they become of childbearing age.
Well,
I'm just tossing that out.
But let me jump in here. There's already pretty heavily enforced nowadays, much better than 2 or 3 decades ago, of state governments going and county governments going after the fathers of these children to kick in for support. Now, that being said, there are plenty of women who the government just can't keep up with where their partners are.
Listen, I'm involved with a friend whose daughter-in-law from previous, her ex from previous marriage now owes her $250,000. Last time he paid child support was months and months and months ago, paid $500. The courts have been giving him the runaround. These people are desperate. She has 3 children. So don't tell me that they're enforcing, because they're not.
You're a conservative. You are a supporter of Donald Trump. Why didn't the ruling somehow, or why didn't the former administration say, we're going to get this money for you, and we're, the money that men owe to women? You can't
ignore the Family Security Act, and you can't ignore GOP proposals to make child support liable from the point of conception. This is a fundamentally conservative argument. Make men have responsibility for their actions.
No, it actually began under, I think, President Clinton. But I'm saying Romney wants
to use what remains of the SALT deduction, take that away, and fund the Family Security Act, which would do precisely this.
Let's let Anne finish, and then I got to move on, Anne, because we're about out of time.
The point again is, let's look forward. And again, I cited the thing about mandatory vasectomies. Let's hit men where they live, so to speak, to show what it means to have control over your reproduction. And right now, one of the biggest problems I have is women are not equal before the law right now. They aren't. They come in third. Men, the fetus, and then the woman.
Wouldn't it be first fetus?
Yeah, maybe so.
All right. Now, one last question for Erin, because, and then, we'll get to Donna in the next segment. But Erin, you run a pro-choice activist group. Are women going to keep this motivation through November? Are they? What's going to happen in the midterms?
Oh, Bonnie, this is so much bigger than the midterms. Yes, it will be a huge factor in the midterms, but this goes to just a seismic shift. Every day, I'm hearing from people who are crying about their daughters and what has happened to them under the law. And so I think what we're going to see is huge political shifts over the long term. And there will be direct action protests in the streets. I'm leading one tonight. There will continue to be work everywhere from the polls to the streets to culture.
How do you keep it alive, though? I mean, voters in America are very apathetic. I once had a conservative friend who said, yeah, they don't, after 200 years, they don't, they're bored with voting. We should be Israel, and, where we're only a 40 or 50-year-old country and 98% turn out. But Americans, and particularly American Democrats, don't go to the polls.
But Bonnie, what has just happened is for so long, many people thought the abortion issue was somebody else's issue, and that is no longer the case. What we have is anti-abortion proposals right now to ban freedom of speech on abortion, anti-abortion proposals to ban the protection of state laws so that people can't go in and get abortions in other states. That's in contravention of our Constitution, and anti-abortion proposals that would actually make it illegal to talk about abortion. So when we have those problems all together, I think that more and more people are going to wake up. This is part of a broader outsourced theocratic regime in order to support a descent into authoritarianism.
Okay. Thank you, Genevieve, for joining us for this segment. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter @To the Contrary. From abortion rights to strong women.
Are women the only ones strong enough to stand up to former President Donald Trump? That's a serious question, dogging the January 6th hearings on the insurrections. Cassidy Hutchinson, a young White House aide, told the House committee Trump wanted to appear at the Capitol during the attack. She said he became irate, even violent, toward his Secret Service driver, who told him no, he couldn't go to the Capitol during the insurrection because he wouldn't be safe. She also reports Trump said VP Mike Pence should be hanged and that he knew the insurrectionists were armed, but wanted them to march on Congress anyway. The committee's vice chair is another Republican woman, Liz Cheney. She's being lauded by some for being one of the few members of the GOP to condemn Trump's actions during the insurrection.
Donna Edwards. So does it take a woman to stand up to someone who appears to be a very angry, possibly violent man?
Well, I do think that the courage that was displayed by Cassidy Hutchinson is amazing. I mean, that she, early in her career, keep in mind she's got the rest of her life ahead of her, and she has stood up to offer her testimony against one of the most lawless presidents that we've ever had. And I think it took a lot of courage. Liz Cheney is like a dog with a bone. She's not going to let go of this because
is she going to win re-election? The polls show her.
Can I just tell you something? It doesn't matter because what matters is the Republican. I think she's made that very clear that winning one election is not going to be enough to save the Republic. And I think that she's come out on the side of trying to get to the truth, expose the truth, and to hold Donald Trump once and for all accountable. And our system deserves that, deserves the courage of these women. And how dare these men who were in the room, who were present at the time, to stand behind and not come forward in the way that these two courageous women have done. And that's not to say that I agree with their politics on like anything else, but I do agree with their goal of saving the Republic.
All right, Tiana, what do you think about this? Does it take a woman to stand up to an angry man?
I would say that it doesn't take a woman, considering that the three people who I think we can thank the most for January 6th, not devolving into something worse than it was, were, Brad Raffensperger, Brian Kemp, and most importantly, Mike Pence. It was Mike Pence who decided to stay there at the Capitol, who was adamant in the fact that, no, Donald Trump did not win the election. The election was not stolen. That being said, there is a very big difference between what Liz Cheney is doing and what Cassidy Hutchinson is doing. Liz Cheney, she's going to be on the board of Raytheon come, January 2023. She'll be fine. You do have a younger staffer. You're taking a 26-year-old, someone also at the start of their career. And unfortunately, the January 6th committee did not do her any favors in making the center focus of her testimony, dumping to all the journalists that the central piece was going to be the allegation about Trump trying to grab the steering wheel from the presidential SUV, and then
the net grab, and by some accounts grabbing the guy around the neck.
Here's the thing:
like he was
by some accounts, the problem is Cassidy Hutchinson said who told her this story firsthand, and that person says that they never said that. So you have to have the January 6th committee really ought to have corroborated that anecdote and who told it to her before blowing her up to be A1 of the New York Times. That's she's a grown woman. She's a professional woman, as I'm not going to say that they should have treated her like a child, but just out of fairness to someone who's willing to put, their career on the line, you don't let someone voice an allegation like that publicly on primetime television without getting some sort of corroboration, which they did not do. You now have two stories, and it makes her look less questionable.
It is called congressional hearings, I believe. And it's not, at this point, Congress can't indict anybody here. But Erin, my husband is a litigator who has been watching these proceedings very closely. And he and a lot of his litigator friends, and my husband's litigated before the Supreme Court, they believe that what has come out of the January 6th hearings, and particularly the testimony of Hutchinson and the holding of the hearings, the co-chair of the committee, Liz Cheney, this is going to force Merrick Garland, who has kind of been hovering in a corner somewhere, to indict at least people very close to the president, possibly the president, for helping mount an insurrection. Because what this committee has done for me, who has not followed this issue closely, is show, my God, Trump. I used to think Trump was just like Trump was in the White House, and these, the white nationalists were doing all of this on their own. But what the committee has shown is, Trump was orchestrating it.
Absolutely, Bonnie. And if we're going to defend the United States of America as a republic, then we need to come together with folks from all political persuasions to deal with this. And I do think it would be important that our country takes more actions than just simply holding hearings, some of which in prime time. Now, don't get me wrong, it's some of the most important things that have happened in Congress and certainly my lifetime, these particular hearings. And I also would like to just note that it is notable that it is women who are leading the charge, the women who are tuning into their patriotism right now on the Republican Party side. And that's not an accident. It's a pattern around the world that global defense of democracy often rests with women. I think that is why we're also seeing huge attacks on women's rights right now.
I mean, it is. Will all this matter at the ballot box come November? And I think it's sad that, no, this won't happen. Look, I'm someone who said that on January 6th, I wrote a piece. Yeah, this is impeachable and convictable behavior. That's how you get rid of this. But you have even liberal legal scholars saying that the problem is even just the image of impropriety of Merrick Garland going forward with some sort of criminal conviction, however justified it is. If Trump declares himself a candidate again, could be setting the stage for the next Trump's "the election was rigged" type thing. Although, quite frankly, if you look at these inflation numbers, if you look at 8.6% inflation, if you look at double gas prices since the beginning of this last presidency, Republicans won't even have to steal the next election. They'll just get it the old-fashioned way.
First of all, are women leading the way? Well, within hours, Cassidy's testimony was debunked. Civil service is now willing to come and testify that what she said is a lie. The person who supposedly told her all this stuff is willing to come forward under oath and say what she told was a lie. I don't know what her agenda is. I don't know what job she's been promised, but she's going to turn out to be the Jussie Smollett or the new Michael Abington of the media. I think it's really sad. I think she's going to be, totally destroyed over this. And in terms of the others, Liz Cheney, she was handpicked by Pelosi, not the Republicans, because they knew she would be like a dog with a bone going after Trump. She hates him because he went after Bush and Cheney.
Let's put it this way. They all have reasons to go. They all have reasons to dislike each other. Donna, last a sentence or two. What's going to happen in the midterms?
Cheney's gone. Cheney will be gone.
Look, I think that there are going to be a lot of factors in the midterms. Obviously, people vote their pocketbooks, but I do think that this question of preserving and protecting the republic and the question of abortion rights are going to factor very heavily, especially in swing districts and swing states, that's going to matter to independents. It's going to matter to Republicans who are not slid off of the deep end with Donald Trump. And I don't buy the conventional wisdom about what the outcome of the election will be.
All right. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary. See you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Park Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation. For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more PBS.